Hello! Before we get down to cinema, I would like to draw your attention to our Patreon. Regular listeners will know that these podcasts are supported by Quad, our home cinema in Derby, UK. But as Quad is a charity, we want to make Cinelit as self-sustainable as possible. So, to that end, we have set up a two-tier way in which you can support Cinelit. For our 35mm Cine fans, you'll get a bonus additional episode each month where we will be deep diving into an area of cinema that will be exclusive to Patreon subscribers for at least 6 months before it arrives like a late dinner guest on the regular feed. Plus, you get the episodes a week in advance of the main feed release. But if you want to support us and don't feel that pressing need to have the additional podcast each month, but still want that warm, satisfying feeling of being part of the Cinelit success story, then you can become an 8mm Cine fan, where you can donate and get our heartfelt thanks. Head over to the Patreon page and subscribe if you can. However, we know that times are hard at the moment, so please do not feel you need to subscribe if you are not able. We'll still be putting out new, free-to-listen-to episodes on a regular basis throughout the year. Now let's get back to your regular scheduled broadcast. Welcome to another episode of Cinelit. Here we are going out searching for a reason to do a Cinelit episode, something that will bring us all together and define our existence and define the purpose of why we are recording this podcast. Yes, today we are looking at MacGuffins. I'm joined as ever by Cinelit's resident expert, Daryl Buxton. How are you, Daryl?
I'm very good, thanks, Adam. I'm staring at my empty coffee cup here on the table and wondering what kind of movie plot might revolve around that static object on this table.
Cool, yes, and we're talking MacGuffins today. Do you want to explain for the viewers who don't know what a MacGuffin is, what exactly a MacGuffin is?
Yeah, it's an idea that was popularised by Alfred Hitchcock. I'm not sure that he actually sort of originated it or originated the term, but it's something he picked up and ran with, and it's become identified with a lot of his films. The idea is that it's an object, or in some cases a person even. We'll go on to talk about that. But it's something at the centre of a film that matters enormously to the characters in the film and is the focus of everything dramatic that takes place in the film's plot, but that the audience doesn't really care about. It could be like a diamond, or it could be a rare stamp or a rare coin or a statue, or as we say, it could even be a person. Or it could just be a person's name. It could be something written on a piece of paper. It could be military secrets. We don't give a toss. You know, we just want to see how it affects things rather than what this thing can do itself. So, yeah, it's an entity that the movie plot revolves around because all of the characters in the film want to get it, get hold of it, achieve it, find it, whatever the drama determines.
Okay, so we talked about Hitchcock. I guess, well, should we start with Hitchcock then? And
yeah.
As you've mentioned, Hitchcock fans are obsessive about the use of MacGuffins in his films.
They are a little. I think we should start with the quote from Hitchcock. He apparently delivered this at Columbia University when he was doing a lecture just before the Second World War, and then he repeated the story to Francois Truffaut during the Truffaut-Hitchcock interviews. And he said about MacGuffin, when he was asked by Truffaut, he said it might be a Scottish name taken from a story about two men on a train. One man says, "What's that package up there in the baggage rack?" And the other answers, "That's a MacGuffin." And the first one says, "What's a MacGuffin?" And the other man says, "A MacGuffin is an apparatus for trapping lions in the Scottish Highlands." And the first man says, "Well, there aren't any lions in the Scottish Highlands." The other one says, "That's a MacGuffin." And Hitchcock then says, so you see that a MacGuffin is actually nothing at all.
Yeah, I mean, on that story, you could argue that MacGuffin's so successful that that's the reason there's no lions in Scotland.
Yeah. Now, interestingly, the first film to mention, I think, in terms of that story, where Hitchcock ends with that line, "A MacGuffin is actually nothing at all." Think of North by Northwest and George Kaplan, the secret agent that everyone's looking for, who turns out to be nothing at all. So I think Hitchcock would have seen George Kaplan as the perfect example. And apparently it's been said that Roger O. Thornhill, the character played by Cary Grant in the film, who's the star of the movie that everyone thinks is George Kaplan, his middle initial O was devised as a giveaway to sort of signify that this film's about nothing. And you could even say, that his initials R-O-T, rot, sort of signify that as well, that this film's a load of rot sort of thing. It's this great, elaborate international spy drama, everyone chasing each other, all looking for this guy, and he's not there. I suppose The Usual Suspects is very similar in that respect.
Yeah. I mean, looking back to Hitchcock, obviously we got the early Hitchcock. One of the key examples is the 39 Steps. I mean, obviously that was built into the original John Buchan novel, but
so a MacGuffin is also a literary device. Then.
Yeah. So maybe that's where the Scottish Highland thing came from, because a lot of the 39 Steps is set in Scotland.
So are we saying that a MacGuffin is a Scottish thing? Then it sounds like one.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? Yeah. So with the 39 Steps, we've got the war plans.
Yeah,
that become the MacGuffin that sends him on a massive journey up and down the country.
Yeah, often the case in films made in the late 30s, early 40s, the Sherlock Holmes films with Basil Rathbone that we covered recently, they tend not to have MacGuffins in them. Although I think there's specifically the wartime, the famous wartime adventures, the early Universal films, were about MacGuffins. They were about sort of secret plans, or there's Sherlock Holmes and the secret weapon, where you've got this thing called the bomb sight, which is this new invention, which is divided up into 4 parts and spread around. So effectively, you've got 4 MacGuffins there, or a MacGuffin that's divided up and spread around the globe. So the MacGuffin has got. It's not always a simple thing. It's not always easy to define.
No.
But yeah, these early films, sort of late 30s, early 40s, often would have. I suppose this goes with the times. We're in a war situation. You'd have spy plans. You'd have secret documents. You'd have microfilm, things like
letters
that.
of transit for Casablanca.
Casablanca,
that kind of,
yeah. And again, who gives a monkeys about the letters of transit in Casablanca? you want to see Bergman and Humphrey Bogart get together, and all the characters in the film are mad about these letters. We don't care.
Yeah, I don't know. I came out of that movie going, I could have done with more letters of transit in that film. Just, it's a little light on those letters.
Yeah.
But masterpiece. A MacGuffin. Obviously, it becomes defined as a sort of like MacGuffin. It tends to be an object.
Yeah.
For instance, like we talked about the 39 Steps, but one of the other key ones is another Bogart film from moving on from Casablanca is Maltese Falcon.
That's perhaps the classic MacGuffin movie. There famously, of course, there were 3 versions of that on film, and then the Blackbird, the sort of comedy sequel in the 1970s. And all 4 of those movies focus around a MacGuffin. In 3 of the films, it is the Blackbird. It is the sort of ornamental enamel figure of the falcon encrusted with jewels. In Satan Met a Lady, the Betty Davis film from 1936, they change it into a ram's horn filled with gems, just to ring the changes a bit. But then all the characters are still after this ram's horn.
Well, that was the Satan Met a Lady was the first adaptation of the story, wasn't it?
No, that was done.
Second.
Maltese Falcon was filmed in 1931 under that title. Then Satan Met a Lady.
That's right. And then
the classic, the Houston Bogey, Sydney Greenstreet.
It is fascinating that they made 3 versions of the same story within like a 10, 12 year period.
Yeah.
And the final one is arguably the definitive one.
Yeah. And what's interesting is that John Huston apparently was asked by the studio in 1942, in early 1942, right in the wake of the hit movie, The Maltese Falcon. He was asked, "Can you make a film called The Further Adventures of the Maltese Falcon?"
Mm-hmm.
And then his scheduling was all wrong. He was moving on to do other things, and he'd just not got the time to do it. I wonder if The Maltese Falcon would have become a name like the Thin Man did, where it refers to something, a specific object in the first film, or a specific idea or person in the first film, and then just becomes a sort of generic name. I guess Humphrey Bogart would have gone on to be called the Maltese Falcon in a series of movies or something.
Yeah, Pink Panther was a good example of that.
It's sort of a good job that never happened. But in a way, I'd like to see a sequel. And of course, we then got one with the Black Bird in the 70s, but it was sort of done as a comedy. What happens at the end of the Black Bird is that everyone's chasing around the Falcon, which by this point we all know is a fake. We know this from the Houston film.
Spoilers.
Yeah. Well,
of a movie that's nearly 80 years old.
I know. Yeah. Are we going to spoil Citizen Kane later on as well? But yeah, the Black Bird. The audience all know, and the cast and the characters in the film all know that what they're chasing is a fake, And then right at the end of the film, there's this suggestion that it might be real after all. So you can sort of play around with your MacGuffin and make it into something different as it goes along. You can transfer meaning to it, which I suppose if something's there as a sort of symbolic object, it's open to that, it is open to having different meanings put on it, and characters may well be chasing after it for their own different reasons.
Yeah, I was just about to say that. It is there to get a multitude of people enamoured, enthralled by it, so it means different things to different people in a lot of films. Some people, we'll talk about some of the more recent examples of MacGuffins later on, but there is examples of two sides of the coin. The MacGuffin to kill, the MacGuffin to save. It's the same MacGuffin, but different.
Getting back to Hitchcock, he even before the 39 Steps, he'd already made a virtue of putting MacGuffins in his films, although not as many as his fans think. I think if you look online, there are lists of Hitchcock MacGuffins, and some of them are pretty desperate from his defenders and fans. They try and find one in every film, and I don't think there is one in every film, far from it. But the ones where it really works stand out as among the best in cinema, and Hitchcock was the master of this. But yeah, you'd get papers, documents, devices, or even things, secrets that were stored in a character's head, like Miss Froy with the coded tune in The Lady Vanishes. Yeah. So you've actually got an idea that's just stuck in someone's mind or brain that people are then trying to find that person with a view to torturing them, to getting that out. Again, I suppose Moriarty does that occasionally in the Sherlock Holmes series. But to sort of define what a MacGuffin is and what a MacGuffin isn't, I think in the Sherlock Holmes movie, The Pearl of Death, you could say, well, the Pearl of Death is in the title and it's the thing that people are looking for in the movie. But I'd say that turns out not to be a MacGuffin, because it isn't so much the focus of the plot. The people are actually looking for the Napoleon busts that the pearl is alleged to be hidden in. So I'd say that the Napoleons are what we're sort of focusing on.
So the Napoleons, the MacGuffin?
They sort of are, but then they're given a function in the story. They almost become a character in the story rather than just being a sort of set object that people are looking for. They're used in the story. They're broken up and then they're sort of hidden in all the broken crockery. So I'd argue, and I'll go on to argue with other films, that I think there are things that appear to be MacGuffins but that either aren't, or that lose their MacGuffin status as the film progresses. And we'll talk about that with some more recent films, I think, later on. But yeah, I think me and you may have a different sort of definition of what a MacGuffin is.
Well, I guess it depends on how strict your terminology. You sound like you're militantly strict on this, Daryl. Ultimately, it's all film theory, so it's open for discussion.
It's
but, I think I'm maybe a bit more flexible. I think it's if something loses its MacGuffin status because it becomes actively involved in the plot 5 minutes before the end. It's still been a MacGuffin for most of the movie, yeah.
That's fair enough.
So, but the films we talked about so far, have all been sort of like thrillers, detective stories, action films, film noir crime stories, films that have that sort of like genre elements to where the plot is being driven by the search for this MacGuffin.
Yeah.
But it is we mentioned briefly Rosebud and Citizen Kane. That's the MacGuffin for Citizen Kane, and it's not a thriller. It's not an action film. It's a drama.
Yeah, it's interesting, Citizen Kane, because it's kind of structured like a thriller. Even though it isn't one, it is a drama. It's the story of this one man's life. It's this great epic sort of journey through America and at a particular period. And it's got this thing at the heart of it. And the great thing about the MacGuffin in this film is we don't know what it is. Even we're guessing along with the characters. It's not an object, although we find out that it is an object, but we don't know that while we're watching the film. All we've got is a mysterious word. How great! How great!
So when we get that's interesting. Your definition
and how they turn that into cinema is wonderful.
Well, I mean that's why it's probably one of the most recognised, one of the best films ever made. So, but just broadening out your terminology of MacGuffin, this is just a word. We as an audience don't know what it is, so it's actively involved in the plot in the sense that it informs everything that we're thinking about, watching, and what the characters are as well.
I'd say it's an abstract idea stemming from that word. People don't know what it is, and because they don't know what it is, or don't know where to find what it is, that for me works as a MacGuffin in a way that Rosebud doesn't ever take an active part in the plot. It's a classic MacGuffin in that the plot revolves around it.
Yeah,
it doesn't then do stuff.
Yeah.
In the way that the classic Hitchcock MacGuffins don't do things. They're just there as the thing that people are searching for. Or in the case of something like Lady Vanishes or North by Northwest, it's this abstract concept that people are searching for. Notorious is an interesting Hitchcock film in this period because uranium starts out as the MacGuffin, and then we get a second one introduced in the form of the key.
Yeah.
So Hitchcock's really sort of toying with us there and saying, you can have more than one MacGuffin in a film,
Yeah.
Keep watching, there might be more.
So I like the idea about it not being actively involved in the story, in the plot.
That's my sort of strict thing on this, is that the MacGuffin must take no part in the plot and must not do anything to anybody. It must just be an idea at the core of the film.
Okay, so two of the films that in the more, like I say modern, but I mean in the last 40 years is probably more. Two of the films that are flagged up as being great examples of modern day MacGuffins are Raiders of the Lost Ark and in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade.
Yeah. George Lucas, if you look at interviews with Lucas online, he insists that there are MacGuffins all through the Star Wars films and all. He even called R2-D2 a MacGuffin. That's nonsense. He says in whatever we're calling it, A New Hope or whatever, he says, R2-D2 is the MacGuffin in that. No, he's not. He's central to the drama. He's not just the thing that everything revolves around. Yet Lucas also claims that the Indiana Jones films have MacGuffins. And in fact, he also says, interestingly, that he uses the word feeble at one point in describing them. He thinks the MacGuffin in Last Crusade is, in his words, feeble.
A feeble MacGuffin.
Yeah. And the one in Temple of Doom, he doesn't like all that much either. He loves the one in Raiders of the Lost Ark, and I'm saying that isn't a MacGuffin. On the basis that they're looking for the Lost Ark, giveaway in the title, and immediately at the start of the film, it is a MacGuffin. It's what people are looking for. It's what the plot revolves around. But I would say at the point when they find it and when they open it, it does things. It does things to characters in the movie. It unleashes its killer force, and it actively becomes involved in the plot. And at that point, it loses its MacGuffin status for me.
Yeah, I'd probably agree. I mean, I love Raiders of the Lost Ark, so don't get me wrong.
I do.
However, the ending of Raiders of the Lost Ark always frustrates and annoys me because it takes all agency away from its characters.
Yeah.
Its characters, Indiana Jones, the whip, the gun, the whole sort of like daring do adventure kind of guy, solves this whole problem of defeating the Nazis by closing his eyes.
Yeah.
And remaining on a pole, it's just
and he isn't the person who achieves the victory.
Not at all. No, so for some reason, it always frustrates me that, and then this ties into it. It's just making me frustrated even more with it.
Yeah. So what about the other indie adventures?
Well, I think if you take your guide of it becoming fully involved in the plot, then I think the only true MacGuffin is the second one.
Yeah, Temple of Doom.
The second one, the stones.
Yes,
the Shankara stones. I guess they're referring to them as the MacGuffin.
It's always a good sign of a MacGuffin when a jewel is given some ludicrous name. That happens in Romancing the Stone in the same year, and it harks back to Sherlock Holmes' Terror by Night and things like that. Give your trinket a ridiculous sounding name or grand sounding name. It's a MacGuffin.
Yeah. So I think in the second one, yes, because we don't care about those stones. It's just what propels those characters on.
Yeah.
And it ultimately becomes about freeing the children that are being enslaved in that and stopping all the manner of horrors.
That's the plot.
That's the plot.
What we're interested in. The characters are interested in the stone.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And even then it doesn't work that much because as soon as they realise that the kids are all in danger and are being stolen, that becomes the focus of certainly of Indy.
But that's great. That's a good MacGuffin at work because you there's a point in a good MacGuffin movie. There's a point where you forget the MacGuffin and it doesn't matter anymore. It doesn't always have to be the focus of the plot right up to the end. It just has to get the ball rolling and get everything sort of moving around it.
Yeah, I mean,
it sits at the core of the film,
Yeah, exactly. And in Indiana Jones' Last Crusade, he drinks from the cup, the Holy. He's literally the Holy Grail. It's. I can understand why he calls it feeble because it is like literally on the nose. It's like a MacGuffin. It's like it's the Holy Grail. It's what they're all searching for. It's like, well, it's literally the Holy Grail. But then it becomes an active part of the plot at the end. It's the reason why.
Whereas
they drink.
Whereas the Holy Grail in Monty Python and the Holy Grail,
is a MacGuffin. Yeah, and way more fun.
Yeah. And certainly doesn't matter.
No, absolutely not. No.
By the time you get to the end, we've forgotten all about it.
A lot of the films we've been talking about here have like ridiculously sounding grand names for the stones, the Maltese Falcon, various different Death Star plans, or whatever you want to call them, MacGuffin. But it can be a person.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be an inanimate object that people are wanting. It can be a person. And the one that I flagged up earlier, and I mentioned it in the office here, and it got a roundly like scorn poured upon it, mainly because I think people identify MacGuffins as a cheap way of propelling plots, as like, lesser movies have MacGuffins to take the weight off actually doing a real film.
Yeah, it's an easy way of getting motivation.
So when you say, well, that's a MacGuffin in this film, people go, oh, no, it can't be because that's a great film.
Yeah, it's a good movie.
Exactly, yeah. So I mentioned Colonel Kurtz in Apocalypse Now, and my colleague in the office was like, immediately like, no, it's not. It's not a MacGuffin. It can't be.
Do you not think as well, Adam, that people are resistant to the idea of a person being a MacGuffin in that they may push the boundaries of my theory in that they are very, very likely to interact with other characters and become a part of the drama. I think people can sort of see that as well. They say, oh, MacGuffin has to be an inanimate object or an abstract idea. It can't be a human being. I agree with you. We came up with a list of examples between us before. We've got the Private Ryan, for instance.
Yeah, Saving Private Ryan.
Yeah. And Doug in a couple of the Hangover movies.
Yeah, first and third one,
And Rowan Morrison in The Wicker Man, who we sort of see at the end of the film, but she's not really an agent within the movie. Everybody else has been involved in the plot. She's just a name. Even her own mother sort of, denies that she's there, and she's just this idea that gets everything moving, But yeah, Apocalypse Now, I absolutely agree with you. So if you want to talk a bit more about that.
Well, yeah, we were just talking about it. I mean, I think some of the resistance was because it's such a great performance from Marlon Brando. that the idea that Marlon Brando's performance is nothing is really galling to people. I think.
I don't think that's what we're saying, though.
No, I don't think it is either.
No.
It's the reason why all the characters are doing the things that they are doing.
Exactly.
And even when they find him, he doesn't interact with them.
Yeah.
Beyond conversation, he doesn't change the plot. He doesn't change the direction of travel for the characters. He's just the end point.
Yeah. He becomes a focal point for us, but then he sort of becomes our MacGuffin because we're not interested in him because of stuff that he's doing. We're interested in him because he's been found.
Yeah,
and we're still interested in how, having now been discovered. It's like there's this whole drama going on around the idea of Kurtz, and then this idea of a drama going on around the reality that he's there, he's real. We found him. And again, he's now affecting the drama in a different way. It's almost here a case of a MacGuffin that doesn't want to be a MacGuffin. That he's got his own thing going on. He's got his own world around him that he affects. But we don't really care about that. We care about how he's going to affect the characters that we've been following.
Yeah.
And as such, he almost becomes two MacGuffins again. It's this idea of the split bomb site in the Sherlock Holmes movie. He splits off into something else. We've got the MacGuffin of Kurtz, the legend, the idea. Does he or doesn't he exist? And we've then got the MacGuffin of, there's this real person living in this jungle community who's this incredibly sort of powerful and charismatic figure.
I guess a lot of it goes back to how strict you want to be on the definition of MacGuffin. And also it's
in that sense, the Wizard of Oz works in the same way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oz is Kurtz, and then they find him. And again, he's still this enigma, even when we know that he's real.
Yeah.
There's this whole other drama. Once they find out he's real and they find out more about him, he doesn't do stuff. And it's the fact that he doesn't do stuff and can't do stuff that then sets off this whole other drama in the final act.
I get. As I said before, I guess it certainly depends on how strict your MacGuffin definition wants to be. I mean, if you're a MacGuffin, your thing is a MacGuffin for 90% of the movie, then starts to interact with the plot, does that make it any less of a MacGuffin? Because it changes its status towards the end.
I'd say not. One thing you can do that makes these figures not MacGuffins is to make a separate movie about them. If someone went away and actually made a movie about Kurtz and said, I'm doing this sequel to Apocalypse Now, we're gonna look at his story and how he finds his way into the jungle and how he gets his status within this tribe and what he's plotting and what he's planning to do. He's not a MacGuffin in that film. He's a character. But we never see that in Apocalypse Now.
No, we don't.
You could do a Wizard of Oz story where we see things from the wizard's point of view, and that's his story. That's not a MacGuffin movie, but in the Wizard of Oz, he's a MacGuffin.
So, but going back to Indiana Jones, the Ark of the Covenant, it is a MacGuffin for 95% of the movie.
Yes, it is.
And then at the very end, it changes. Does that make it less of a? Does that make it any less of a MacGuffin?
For me, it does, because I'm taking a sort of strict view on this. I would even argue that it negates its MacGuffin status at all. Because when I go back and watch Raiders of the Lost Ark for a second time, I'm going in knowing what happens at the end, and I'm thinking, right, the search for the Ark is now not as important to me second time around as it was first time. It sort of shifts. Now I know how it all comes out, and I know that the Ark is revealed at the end, and I know it does stuff. It sort of changes the whole movie for me. What's great about it, though, is that they try and reclaim MacGuffin status for it right at the very end.
By sticking it in a warehouse.
When it's shoved in a warehouse with 10,000 other MacGuffins, which is a wonderful, wonderful ending, and even better in the context that we're talking about.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
It's almost as though the filmmakers are aware that they've lost the MacGuffin status, and they're trying to desperately cling on to it and retrieve it. I think they do.
Yeah,
I think they pull it around.
It becomes that thing that people are searching for.
It becomes that enigma once again. Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about any other examples that you want to flag up? I mean,
we're talking about people as MacGuffin.
Yeah.
So we've mentioned Private Ryan. Yeah, Rowan Morrison. We mentioned
the Hangover films.
in Doug in the Hangover, and in one of the later sequels, I think, as well. He's used in a similar way. Yeah, a couple of others. Back to Hitchcock again. Another classic, and it's one that people don't often think about. Is the $40,000 in Psycho. The entire plot revolves around that. Or certainly...
I'm not sure about the entire plot. And the reason for putting the characters in their place.
I think there are two plots going on in Psycho, and one of them, all of that revolves around the 40,000, or is kick-started by the theft of the 40,000. Yeah. Even once Janet Leigh has been killed, again, spoilers, her family and her friends then become involved in the plot. Now, they wouldn't be involved in the plot had she not been the person who disappeared. Yeah. And she wouldn't be the person who disappeared had she not stolen the money. So it's the money that's sort of central to that. And it's great that the genius of Hitchcock there is that, and the genius of Robert Bloch in the novel, is that you've then got this whole other crazy plot going on about this mad transvestite figure who believes that he's his own mum, you know. And the two worlds collide. One's got a MacGuffin in, the other hasn't. Again, Hitchcock apologists and people who love looking for MacGuffins in Hitchcock films have even said Mrs. Bates is a MacGuffin. I don't buy that, but there's maybe I can sort of see their argument.
No. Because
I don't think there are MacGuffins in the two halves.
I think she plays an active role in the story of Norman.
Yes, she does.
And I think in that case,
we believe that she's a character until we find out she's not.
Yeah, absolutely.
Certainly first time through, you know. So, I disagree with that. And if you're saying that there are MacGuffins in both halves of Psycho, in both of the plots, that offers a balance to the film that I don't think is intended. I think the idea of the film is it is out of balance. Yeah. And I think to even it up and say, oh, yeah, there's this on one, the $40,000 and Mrs. Bates sort of equate to each other and are two halves of the equation, I think gives the film a perceived symmetry that isn't intended. That film's not about symmetry. It's about being off kilter.
Yeah, absolutely.
All the way through. And so having a MacGuffin in one half of it and not in the other is perfect. That's what the film's about.
Yeah. Hitchcock seems to be the guy that strings them all together in spin-offs. I mean, a lot of his stories are obviously involving like detectives or plots or crime stories. And it becomes a trait of, though, I mean, obviously the Maltese Falcon, it becomes a trait of those kind of films to have a MacGuffin.
Yeah, even Hitchcock himself was doing it in up to the 60s at the very least, with Torn Curtains, got the formula in it that everyone's chasing. We again don't care one bit about that, but everyone in the film does, you know. And even as far as Frenzy, I would say, Frenzy doesn't really have a MacGuffin, but one scene in Frenzy does, which is the lost tie pin. So Hitchcock's doing a little mini MacGuffin within the central drama there. So right up almost to the end, he's sort of pulling off the trick, and even managing to sort of change the idea of what a MacGuffin is. You know, not having the whole film revolve around it, but having this one important scene revolve around it. Yeah. And hugely influential on sort of every other thriller that came out from about 1940 onwards. I suppose if you think, I mean, we're talking about people as MacGuffins as well. Hitchcock had been there, and again, it's from the source novel, but he'd been there with the Mrs. De Winter in Rebecca. Yeah. Who we don't even ever see, you know. She's just a name.
And you mentioned Lady Vanishes as well. You know, Lady Vanishes
again. We do sort of eventually see her, but the entire plot is about. Well, again, we've got a MacGuffin within a MacGuffin there because she's got a secret and she's vanished, and everyone's looking for her so they can get the secret. So it's a Russian doll.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and also it's like. Yeah, she becomes the MacGuffin three quarters of the way, halfway through the movie, whatever, when she vanishes. But another good example. Should we get on some more modern films? There's a couple of good ones that speaks to that lineage of the Big Lebowski and his quest for the rug.
The rug, which matters. It's the big thing in life for Lebowski, and we don't care one jot. So.
No, but it really ties the room together, so it's fine.
It ties the film together.
It ties the film together as well, exactly. But that's up from the lineage of the Maltese Falcon and those kind of movies. But I suppose the biggest one is like some of the most successful films of all time. Two of the most successful films of all time, the Avengers films recently, are all MacGuffins. Really.
And we only really find that out as they progress. We get towards the end of the saga, and these things called the Infinity Stones suddenly come into play. And then when you go back and watch all of the earlier films, you're sort of thinking about those. And I think there's a lot of other stuff you're thinking about as well when you rewatch, from Iron Man onwards. Because we know what's coming, it's sort of the reverse of what I said about Raiders of the Lost Ark. Because we know what's coming, and we know that part of that is this thing that everyone's looking for. I think that infects our view of those earlier films when we rewatch them.
Yeah.
But certainly within the films themselves, where the stones come into play, they are a classic MacGuffin.
We've got 27 film MacGuffin. Series there.
and even though arguably you could say they're sort of the same as the Ark in that they do stuff, but I would say the stones themselves don't do stuff in the way that the Ark does. I think they need a controller. They need someone.
It's the person that does.
And they need to be collected together. That's the point. And that for me is a classic MacGuffin. It comes back to the Bond site in the Sherlock Holmes film. They again have been divided and thrown across the galaxy, and it's a question of going on and locating them all, bringing them together so that you can achieve your aim. But the stones themselves are inanimate objects that only have this power when they come together. And so, they're a MacGuffin in the way that the Ark isn't for me.
Yeah. Any other examples you want to flag up as good examples or indeed bad examples?
Yeah, I do. I want to mention just briefly another podcast favourite, the cassette in Escape from New York.
Yeah.
Which is an unusual MacGuffin in that we quite often see it or hear it. We don't just hear people talking about it, We see it or we see a cassette in operation, And again, as it turns out, there are two, There's the real one and the fake one or the substitute one. Yeah, one point I want to bring up is to compare the films Kiss Me Deadly and Pulp Fiction.
Oh, here we go. Yeah, Pulp Fiction, because obviously modern audiences would talk about Pulp Fiction as being a MacGuffin.
Yeah.
It's a tricky one because it's.
I'm saying it is, and I'm saying the film that inspired it, or the film that inspired its MacGuffin, Kiss Me Deadly, that also has a suitcase that is filled with some kind of glowing substance or some kind of strange material. In Kiss Me Deadly, I would say it's not a MacGuffin because, again, it's like the Ark. When we see it opened at the end of the film, we see its power, we see what it can inflict on the world, which is apocalypse, basically. For that reason, it's exactly like the Ark. It's a thing that everyone's searching for, and then when they find it, some idiot opens it, and we see what it can do, and it becomes a character in the drama. In Pulp Fiction, they open it, but very, very cleverly, they don't give away its secrets. They keep us guessing, and it remains a MacGuffin. I would say there's a subtle difference there.
Okay, so my counter argument to that is that,
which we always want to hear.
Exactly, in a way that, for instance, so like comparing it to like the Raiders of the Lost Ark, for instance, or Kiss Me Deadly. That's a MacGuffin for 99% of the movie, right?
Yeah.
And then at the final scenes,
the final reckoning,
it stops becoming a MacGuffin.
The great opening, yeah.
In Pulp Fiction, that's a MacGuffin for 30% of the movie.
Yeah, but it's a MacGuffin for if you divided up the stories in Pulp Fiction and made them into a conventional anthology rather than splitting the scenes across each other and interlacing them all, it's a MacGuffin in one of those stories.
Yes, so for 30% of the film.
Yeah, but in a complete drama, though, in a complete A to Z drama.
Okay, I kind of buy that. I kind of buy
if
that.
It wasn't, if you take that as an individual episode rather than mixing it all in with the others, rather than describing it as 30% of the movie, describe it as a 30-minute film.
Yeah,
and it's the MacGuffin in a 30.
But Pulp Fiction isn't a 30-minute film.
Well,
but equally, like you said, it serves the role of a MacGuffin because the characters are searching for it, but they don't really care what it is. They've just been employed to get it.
And then,
it doesn't dictate any change in the drama or change in them when they do open it.
And I think the genius is they find out what's in there, and we are never told, so it retains its enigmatic status.
Is that nixed from Repo Man? Because the Repo Man, they do a similar thing, don't we? The boot.
Yeah. Again is lifted from Kiss Me Deadly.
Yeah. But equally, but in both Repo Man and Pulp Fiction, they don't reveal what's in the trunk.
So again, I'd say that I don't quite know that it's used as a MacGuffin in Repo Man.
No, it's not. No, it's just a cool scene.
It's sort of part of the drama. So it's something different there. It doesn't really come into this discussion, although I can see why you've thrown it in, because it is the missing link between Kiss Me Deadly and Pulp Fiction. But interestingly, Alex Cox doesn't seem interested in using it as a MacGuffin. He's more interested in, because he doesn't use a case in, it is the boot of a vehicle. So it's the idea from Kiss Me Deadly, but it's a different...
Yeah, different usage.
It's literally a different vehicle.
Yeah.
It is actually a vehicle here, and it's a different type of thing, and it's not used in a dramatic sense as the thing that the plot revolves around in the way that it is in Pulp Fiction, or part of Pulp Fiction, and in Kiss Me Deadly. But yeah, the three films would make a hell of a triple bill.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Yeah, I'd agree. As I say, one quibble of it being part of a section of a bigger story where it doesn't really, because one of the key roles of a MacGuffin is it's the thing that everyone wants, the thing that everyone's driving for, the thing that drives the plot. And Bruce Willis doesn't give a shit about that briefcase.
No.
A lot of the characters in Pulp Fiction don't give a crap about that briefcase.
But in that particular strand, the Jules and Vincent strand, it's a MacGuffin.
Yeah. To them.
So it isn't in the whole of Pulp Fiction, but it is in that individual episode. If you can treat it as an episode, it's all down to the way Tarantino edited the film that is confusing its status there, I think. And any more from you then, Adam? Have you got any other examples to throw in?
There's stories where it is the goal rather than a MacGuffin. Yeah. So it's like, we need to do this because this person needs to go somewhere.
A classic where the whole cast are involved is it's a mad world with the big W.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So things like that. I was just I don't know whether they're MacGuffins.
Or are they
just plot goals? They just plot goals. It's like, the beer in Smokey in Smokey and the Bandit.
I think the thing with those is you sort of know that they're going to be found at the end of the movie.
Yeah.
You think that's the point. I think if a lot of people are looking for something, you sort of know that we know that the end of the third act is going to be there's some of them find it, and it's the target of a quest rather than being the thing that revolves around. I think there is a subtle difference.
But that's kind of the Maltese Falcon. That's kind of Romancing the Stone.
I think the difference there is you've got an object to focus on. You've got a physical object rather than a quest.
So a search for enlightenment isn't.
I'd say that's not really the point of what a MacGuffin is. I think that becomes a drama in itself.
Yeah.
And that becomes part of the drama.
And I think ultimately it was the whole MacGuffin idea was defined to be that thing that I don't care about, you don't care about.
Yeah.
But it just gets us into the mode to tell the story. The
Maltese Falcon isn't a spiritual quest, whereas I think the sort of thing you're talking about can become that, which is why the ring in Lord of the Rings probably isn't a MacGuffin in that sense. It is a symbol of something, but I think
it affects the drama, though, doesn't it?
It does, but I think there's this layer of almost a sort of religious, if you like, layer to it, or spiritual layer to it, that I think just takes it out of the realm of being a hard MacGuffin.
Yeah,
and it's sort of half and half.
I mean, I would say that actually, if anything, I think regardless of the spiritual nature of it, I think it's an active character
again,
in the plot.
It does take on a lost art status to a point.
I mean, but it's all the way through the movie.
Yes,
as soon as Frodo has that ring, it's exerting its influence on him,
or it
changing.
It affects what
exactly.
people do.
So. In that way, it's not really a MacGuffin, even though everyone's looking for it, and it's the whole plot revolves around it. It's an active part of that.
But if someone came to us and said, yes, it is a MacGuffin, I don't think I'd have the heart to argue with them.
Oh, I would. Lord of the Rings fans. Screw you guys.
But fair enough.
No, I wouldn't.
We've just lost about 70% of our audience there. Talking of percentages.
I'm only joking. I like the Lord of the Rings films. But yeah, I think there's an argument to be made that because of the influence it has on that on our lead character, maybe the MacGuffin status is affected.
Yeah.
There you go. That's as far as I'm willing to go.
Yeah. And I mean, I think the difference between a Quest movie and a MacGuffin movie can be seen in something like Jaws, where the idea that there's this shark out there is the thing that propels the plot. But then there's this whole second act where they actually go out and confront it, and it becomes a character in the drama. And I think it always is. From the start, it's a character that's doing things. It attacks someone in the first 5 minutes. It ain't a MacGuffin, even though it achieves the effect of a MacGuffin. So I think there is a difference. A MacGuffin is something much, much more focused than that. And
I think also, just going back to Lord of the Rings, I think its MacGuffin status is probably more of a MacGuffin in The Hobbit, where it is the search for the ring in some ways. Whereas the thing they've already got it. It's it's not we're not searching for it. It's not part of the drama. We're not going to get revealed or anything like that. They've already got it. It's in his hand. He's got to take it and throw it in a volcano. That's the plot. So I could see myself arguing into the wee hours with a Lord of the Rings fan.
I think there's such a thing as the Quest movie, and you can call Jaws a Quest movie, but it isn't a MacGuffin movie, and therefore I'd say Quest movies can be MacGuffin movies, but they sort of sit just above that. They're like a separate strata of cinema.
I mean, Jaws is more like a slasher movie in some ways. It's like you've got a killer, it's killing lots of people, 3 people go out to kill the killer.
Yeah,
that's ultimately what it was. The fact that it's a shark is kind of just a plot. It's just a story. But it's not. I don't think it's a MacGuffin.
Yeah, but I'm using that as an example to sort of emphasise that there is this different. There's such a thing as the Quest movie, and there's such a thing as the MacGuffin movie, and some films sit outside that. Which Jaws is purely a Quest movie with elements of horror slasher, one body count movie to it as well. So, the Quest movie can be a MacGuffin movie, but isn't always. And therefore, I think the whole subgenre of Quest movies can be seen to sit outside of this discussion, which means that Lord of the Rings doesn't really count.
And I think some Quest movies have multiple concerns in their plots. It's not really about the quest, it's about the journey the characters are going on. And sometimes those journeys have nothing to do with either the plot or the MacGuffin.
Yeah. So again, that's sort of expanding on the idea of what a MacGuffin is, because if you've got a film where you're saying there's a MacGuffin, but then the characters are sort of doing stuff that is not influenced by that, that is influenced by other aspects, you're losing that MacGuffin status, because suddenly that isn't the important thing. That isn't the Maltese Falcon at the heart of the drama.
No, exactly, and it's all fluid, isn't it? It's all fluid,
which is great. Which gives us something to talk about.
There's no MacGuffin police going around saying, "Hang on a minute, it's becoming an active in character." Let's just dial that back.
As I say, Hitchcock pulls out the tie pin in Frenzy and changes the whole game by saying, "Right, there's a MacGuffin in 2 minutes of this film. Deal with it."
Yeah, cool. Lovely. Thank you very much, Daryl. Thank you guys for listening. We will be back again in a couple of weeks' time with another great podcast. In the meantime, please do like us on Facebook. Please do check out our Patreon if you feel so inclined for an extra episode of Cinelit Goodness every month. We will see you soon. Take care.